a helpless father, a child frozen in fear, and a girl who once waited tables, now standing at the edge between the abyss and courage. She is neither wealthy nor famous. Yet it is she, with a simple embrace and a humble story, who made a boy who had once turned his back on the whole world find the strength to move forward. This is not merely a story about Yosemite or bravery. It is the story of unseen wounds and how a stranger can reach places no father ever could. Don't miss it, because in just a few seconds you'll understand why millions are moved to tears by this tale. Amid the thunderous applause at the Oscars and the glowing headlines proclaiming him Hollywood's highest-paid action producer, Bennett once believed himself invincible. He wielded the world through his scripts, orchestrated heart-stopping chases, and turned fear into box office gold. But in real life, no director calls cut when pain strikes. Ilara, his wife, was gone after a fall while scaling a European cliff. In mere minutes, Lucas's entire universe collapsed. They say time heals wounds. Yet a year after the funeral, Lucas still couldn't utter a single complete sentence about what happened. He remained silent, not for lack of words, but because his heart held only ashes. Finn, his 12-year-old son, was the lone spark preventing him from utterly falling apart. And yet that spark was fading. Finn feared heights. He trembled at slopes, balked at stairs, froze on balconies. The boy who once bounded across the sofa as if summiting Everest now lingered on the floor, staring wordlessly at his mother's photographs on the wall. Lucas had tried taking him out. Every time they neared a grassy hill, Finn gripped his hand so tight his little palm drenched his own. Lucas believed time would suffice, but time passed, and Finn's terror did not lessen, it took root ever more deeply. One night, Lucas awoke in the middle of the darkness to find himself before a blank screen, intending to write something, a script, a memory, a message to his wife, yet nothing came. He was a master storyteller and could not tell his own story. Then an old friend called. Without small talk, he said, "You once said Yosemite was Ilara's favorite place. Take Finn back there. If a miracle exists, it's there." Lucas fell silent long after the call ended. He didn't believe in miracles, but he believed in Ilara, and if she had called Yosemite wide enough to weep unseen and high enough to teach courage, he would try. The next morning, Lucas packed a backpack for the two of them. He carried nothing but an old map, a photo of Ilara, and a hope so fragile he dared not name it. Perhaps it is nature itself, not mankind, that writes the ending for hearts left unfinished.
Welcome to 30 Millionaire Stories, where success meets solitude, and every story heals a hidden wound. Subscribe and discover the heart behind the fortune.
If Yosemite were an ancient soul, then Riley Summers is the tiny heartbeat that keeps it alive. In the eyes of visitors, she's just a young park ranger in a faded jacket, dusty boots on her feet, and an old first aid kit slung at her side. Yet few know that before standing among the giant redwoods to lecture on ecology and the life cycle of the peregrine falcon, she waited tables in a roadside diner where orders were called out faster than anyone bothered to learn the server's name. The path from that little cafe on Highway 41 to Yosemite's towering pines was no heroic quest. It was a series of weary days off stage, accompanied only by clattering dishes and the same refrain. "Would you like more coffee, Han?" Riley once dreamed of becoming a conservation researcher, but her mother fell ill in her senior year. She set aside everything to work as a waitress to pay the hospital bills, and gradually her dream faded like a wisp of grease smoke rising from the fryer. Yosemite became an accidental destination. One day, carrying a tray of coffee to the last table, she heard a terrified cry from the bushes behind the diner. A bear cub, its leg trapped in a steel snare. No one dared to approach. Riley did not hesitate. She tore a linen napkin into strips, freed the trap with her bare hands, and bandaged the wound using her apron. That night, her shirt was torn, blood staining her shoulder, and the diner owner scolded her for abandoning her shift. But the forest remembered her name. After that, she spent her evenings poring over biology textbooks. Every weekend, she volunteered at Yosemite. Before long, she was accepted into a ranger support program. The pay was meager, the recognition nil, but each time she stepped onto the preserve, Riley felt she was living as her truest self. She did more than guide tourists. On her patrols, she secretly left bottles of water near threatened dens, carried veterinary supplies in her pack instead of cosmetics. Tips from her old waitressing job still funded meals for orphaned animals, injured foxes, one-eyed owlets, and more. No one knew. She didn't need them to. When the office requested a private ranger to accompany a guest's son on a camping trip, she assumed it would be routine. They didn't tell her it was for Lucas Bennett, the famed producer. Nor did they mention that the boy needed someone to guide him across those slopes with heart, not just a map. Riley had no idea she was about to step into a role grander than any ecology text she'd ever read. On their first meeting, she saw a father whose eyes bore a thin veil of dust, worn but not tired, drained of everything else, and a boy whose gait was cautious, as though each pebble underfoot might betray him. They moved through the majestic wilderness as if lost in their own lives. Riley asked no questions. She simply introduced the trails, the ancient trunks, the fissures in the granite she knew as intimately as her own breath. Yet deep inside, she sensed something was amiss. She had met children afraid of the dark, but never one afraid of every ray of light. Finn did not run, did not laugh, barely spoke. He watched every movement with vigilant eyes, as though the world had become a place too dangerous to trust. Riley recognized that fear all too well. She had walked those same steps after her parents' divorce, her childhood silenced by dinners echoing only the clink of silverware. She did not intend to be a hero. She had no maternal skill set, no special education training. But in that moment, watching Finn inch backward from a rock ledge barely higher than a doorstep, she understood he didn't need someone to lead him. He needed someone unafraid of his fear. Just like that cub once did, he didn't need commands. He needed someone calm enough to stay by his side through the panic. Riley couldn't be sure she was doing it right. But for the first time in years, she felt an invisible thread linking her heart to another without blood or a name to bind it. And perhaps the forest itself had guided her here. Not to heal, but to witness a life waiting to be touched by genuine kindness. Yet, could a girl who once failed at her own dream lead another out of darkness? Or was she merely a temporary waypoint on their journey? Dear viewers, take a moment to relax or pour yourself a glass of water and listen on. The twists ahead may surprise you. Comment 1 if you're enjoying the story, so we know you're still here. That morning, the Yosemite sky was as clear as glass freshly wiped clean. The forest air was cool, carrying the scent of young pine and damp earth after the early morning mist. Everyone in the group was preparing to cross one of the first real challenges of the journey, a narrow suspension bridge spanning 2 rock outcrops just a few meters apart, suspended over a yawning chasm. The children buzzed with a mix of excitement and nerves. They had heard tales of this bridge around the campfire the night before. Some stepped onto it without hesitation, others hesitated, then pressed forward at the sound of cheers, but Finn did not move. He stopped, with only a few steps left before his turn. His eyes were wide, clinging to the rope handrail at the trail's edge. His lips were pressed tight, and he gripped his backpack strap against his chest, as if holding himself together. The bridge wasn't high, but from his vantage point, the void below seemed endless. No one else felt the breeze slipping under his jacket, but Riley did. It was the wind of memory unseen by most, yet enough to drive a child into the depths of fear. Lucas stood a few paces behind, The physical distance between father and son was small, but it might as well have been a world apart. He had stood behind a camera hundreds of times, orchestrating chase scenes on perilous cliffs. Yet today, faced with reality, a child frozen in terror, he didn't know what to do. Part of him wanted to shout for Finn to move forward. Another part feared that a single harsh word would shatter the boy. Riley did not step onto the bridge. She stepped down. She walked slowly to Finn's side, careful not to block his view. She did not ask questions, did not offer reassurances, she merely was there. Sitting beside him like a friend, she let the silence fill the space with warmth, long enough for the child's heart to slow its frantic beat. Then, softly as a leaf touching water, she shared a fragment of her own memory. Years ago, she had been stranded on a slick rock face, unprepared, alone, without the skills or support she needed. She was terrified, paralyzed by fear, but then she learned to breathe slowly, to cling to every tiny foothold. Bit by bit, she climbed back to safety. She did not speak as an adult lecturing a child. She spoke as if to herself, someone who had once trembled and believed she could not return. Riley did not sugarcoat the fear. She honored it as an essential part of courage. A gentle breeze stirred, carrying birdsong across the bridge. Finn remained silent, but his shoulders relaxed. Where he had once gripped the rope, his fingers now only brushed it. Riley stayed by his side, without urging. She simply held out her hand. No invitation, no promise, just a hand. Finn looked at her, looked for a long moment as if asking, "If I go, will you go with me?" And in that instant, he did not need words. Her presence was the answer. He took a step. Riley rose and followed. Not too close, not too far ahead. Lucas remained behind, clutching his backpack strap. His heart felt squeezed and then released all at once. Finn crossed the bridge in slow, deliberate steps, each one a whispered affirmation. "Mom, I'm still afraid, but I will go on." When they reached the far outcrop, the other children burst into applause. Finn did not notice. He simply stood there, tilting his head to the brilliant blue sky visible through the canopy. To him, what had just occurred was not a miracle, but a natural movement like the sun rising after a night of rain. Lucas stepped onto the rock last. He said nothing. Finn did not hug him, nor did he smile. But in that moment, Lucas knew his son had done what he himself could not take another step forward despite his fear. And Riley, with her dusty boots, stood quietly beside them. She was no hero, but she was the one who had waited long enough for a child to find the courage to trust. Sometimes what we need is not someone to pull us forward, but someone who sits beside us and patiently waits for us to stand on our own. But can a single moment of bravery open the door to a journey of lasting change? Or is it merely a small miracle amid the ancient forest? No one truly knows when someone begins to trust. But sometimes it arrives as gently as a breeze, and if someone listens long enough, they will open their heart. That evening, after crossing the suspension bridge, Finn no longer clung to Lucas as before. He stepped a little closer to Riley, not much, only half a pace, but enough for her to sense the shift in a soul that had once been tightly closed. The night passed to the chorus of insects and the glow of a campfire nestled in the trees. No one suggested it, yet Riley spread a thin blanket on the ground beneath a towering pine. Finn quietly sat beside her. Above, the sky was ink black, studded with thousands of sparkling crystal shards. A soft breeze whispered through the branches. The night was so still that one could hear the steady breathing of children already asleep. Riley did not teach. She did not recite facts from a textbook. She simply looked up and pointed to a cluster of bright stars. "Orion," she said, "is the symbol of a warrior not undefeated but never giving up. one who always faces the light even when swallowed by darkness. Finn did not reply, but he tilted his head, his eyes following her finger. The sky inside him was no longer an endless void, but beginning to take shape and meaning. A small question rose from his lips, not loud, not clear, but Riley heard it. "Did Mom ever look at the stars like this?" She did not answer immediately. Without grandiose words, she told of a rare bird that lives alone and sings only once in its lifetime. When it sings, it calls its mate, and then it falls silent forever. No one knows why, but people believe that song is the most beautiful gift it can leave behind. Finn lay back, gazing up at the heavens. Lucas, standing just far enough away not to interrupt, felt his son's breathing slow. He couldn't remember the last time Finn slept without curling into his arms. Now, beneath the night sky, his son lay still, as if nature itself were lulling him in ways no father ever had. In the days that followed, Riley taught Finn how to find direction by the sun, not by a watch. How to listen to the wind to tell if rain or sun was coming. She taught him to distinguish the sparrow's song from the kingfisher's call, to close his eyes and see the forest with his ears. But the most important lesson wasn't about skill. It was about the light returning little by little to Finn's eyes, about his steps losing their hesitation. About the questions he began to ask, not just about his mother, but about tree roots, limestone rock, why leaves turn upward in autumn. Each question was a door opening, and Riley never closed a single one. Lucas watched from afar, as if afraid that drawing near would shatter these fragile moments. He did not intrude, nor did he try to wedge himself between them. Yet that night, for the first time in a year, he saw his son smile. A genuine smile, unforced, unguarded. And he saw Riley, her eyes glowing in the firelight, as though she too was rediscovering a lost part of herself. There was a fleeting moment when the firelight flickered across her tousled red hair, and Lucas caught a glimpse of Alara, not because they looked alike, for they were nothing alike, but because in Riley's quiet presence he saw the same gift Alara once carried, the ability to make others feel safe enough to be themselves. On the last night of their first week, Riley brought an old glass jar. Together, she and Finn chased fireflies and released them into the jar. When they finally lifted the jar into the midnight air, Finn whispered so softly that he wanted to send them to Mom. Riley said nothing more. She simply placed her hand lightly on his shoulder. Lucas turned away. No tears fell, but something welled up, choking his throat. He never imagined that, amid the untamed wilderness, his son's broken pieces might begin to mend by the glow of a few fireflies. Can nights like these truly transform a child? Or are they only a fleeting dream before reality pulls him back? Dear viewers, stay tuned for the next chapter that will leave you in awe. Take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and comment below to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see friends joining us from around the world. There are moments we don't plan for. They arrive like a sudden shift in the wind. Unexpected, simple, but irrevocable. That morning in Yosemite began like any other. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, painting dancing streaks of light across the forest floor. Birdsong provided a gentle soundtrack for the final day of the trip. Finn woke early. He no longer lay cocooned in his sleeping bag as before. Instead, he sat up, cradling the no-empty firefly jar. The night before, Riley had told him that sometimes we must let the light go so it can find its own way back. None of them realized then how profoundly those words would take hold of him. The day's outing was meant to be brief, a low cliff overlooking the valley's expanse of trees and waterfalls. No one required them to climb. There was no test, no mandatory rope gear. But when the group arrived, Finn looked up at the 10-meter rock face, then turned to Riley, wordlessly nodded and clipped on his harness. Lucas froze for a heartbeat. He did not shout, did not intervene. He simply watched his son, the same boy he once carried on his shoulders, once trembling at a single step, now fastening his climbing gear and tightening the carabiner with small, determined hands. Riley stood by, silent, her gaze fixed on Finn. Lucas followed at the rear, not as an instructor but as a shadow, quiet, anxious. Finn began to climb. Step by careful step, breath measured and steady, no cheers, no fanfare, only the whisper of the wind and Lucas's heart pounding like a drum in his chest. The boy's fingers found each rock hold. One foot searched for purchase, then pushed upward. He did not look down. He did not cry. He did not stop. When he reached the top, he turned, his face beaded with sweat but alight with triumph, and shouted for the first time with the force of an explosion, "I did it, Mom!" The cry reverberated through the air like a plea sent to some distant place. Lucas felt his knees buckle. He sank to the ground beneath the cliff, hands pressed into the earth as if in prayer. He did not weep, but he knew something within him had been unburdened so lightly that he almost did not notice, yet so profoundly at the core. Finn descended in silence. But this silence was not fearful. It felt like a ritual completed. Riley spoke not a word, merely laid her hand gently on Finn's shoulder. In her eyes shone more than pride, a quiet acknowledgement. This was the first step of a child who had once lived beyond the reach of fear, but that joy would last fewer than 24 hours. That afternoon, as Lucas checked his phone at the visitor center, he noticed an unusual email. The subject read, "Request to temporarily suspend collaboration, Riley Summers." He opened it and read each line as his expression darkened. Park management announced that Riley had received an official reprimand for unauthorized actions affecting lawful development plans. Beneath the courteous phrasing lay the truth. A real estate conglomerate was negotiating to build a luxury resort on the park's edge. For months, Riley had quietly sent photographs of affected wildlife to local media and environmental groups. No one knew Lucas, least of all. She had never mentioned it during their trip. Lucas was furious, not at Riley but at the system. Furious at those willing to redraw the map, replacing ancient trees with swimming pools, and furious at himself for having once been part of that world. He found Riley near the temporary cabins, where she was folding tents for the children's group. A breeze caught a few strands of her red hair at the nape of her neck, and Lucas saw the sunset spill through the treetops, casting an unfilmable glow upon her. He asked nothing. He questioned no one. He simply stood there, and for the first time, a clear thought echoed in his mind. If he remained silent now, he would lose far more than contracts or acclaim. No longer the producer, no longer the man behind the scenes. Lucas knew he had to act not only for Riley, but for Finn. Because if a child could face fear and prevail, then an adult could not stand down in the face of injustice. He pulled out his phone. He did not call his lawyer. He did not call his assistant. He called an old friend, a documentary filmmaker specializing in nature. His voice was low, without a single flourish. "I need you to help me film a story, not to sell, to preserve." And thus Lucas set his plan in motion, not with money or fame, but with the power of truth. But can one film stand against an entire corporation? Or is this the final battle of a father warring against the world that threatens to devour his son's childhood? Not everyone gets a second chance. But there are those who, once they recognize something truly worth keeping, will use every ounce of what remains to hold on. Lucas Bennett was no longer an action film producer. Yet for the first time in years, he became a storyteller, not with special effects, not with A-list actors, but with the truth. The press conference did not take place in a luxurious Beverly Hills auditorium. It happened right in Yosemite, in an open clearing with towering pines behind him and the distant murmur of a stream. Lucas stood in that setting, a single large screen behind him, just as straightforward as the way he chose to recount his journey, unpretentious and heartfelt. The first clip wasn't a climbing scene or an action sequence. It showed Riley kneeling, loosening the steel trap from a trembling bear cub's paw. Her face didn't shine like a hero's, but like a real person, authentic and full of feeling. Next came short snippets Lucas had captured during the trip. Riley by the fire, speaking of Orion. Riley guiding Finn across the suspension bridge. Finn climbing the rock face. And finally, the moment the boy stood among the pines, raising the firefly jar high, the flickering light inside like a quiet prayer offered to the sky. Lucas offered no commentary, no scripted narration. He let the footage speak for itself. When the screen went dark, he stepped forward. He held no script, only a plan. A documentary series on Yosemite's natural world, on vanishing creatures, on the unsung stewards of the ancient forest, and on children rediscovering themselves in nature. Riley was invited to serve as the lead narrator, and this time it wasn't volunteer work or a short-term gig. She was officially hired as content advisor, with a salary worthy of the years she'd lived authentically among the trees. Lucas didn't need the media on his side, but the impact of the film spreading like wildfire across social platforms forced the property developers to pause their plans. The public didn't want a swimming pool where deer once drank. They didn't want a resort replacing the forest that had healed a child. When Riley received the offer, she fell silent for a long time. She didn't ask about money. She didn't ask about fame. She only wanted to know, had her story truly touched anyone? Lucas didn't answer. He simply showed her the emails from thousands of parents, describing how they wept upon seeing their own children cling to their hands after watching the bridge sequence. At the premiere of the first episode, held in a small theater, Riley sat in the center row. She wasn't wearing her ranger uniform, just a light green dress, her hair loose at her shoulders. Lucas sat a few seats behind, never stepping on stage. He knew who truly deserved that spotlight. Finn, now unshaken by holding a microphone, walked forward under the lights. He wore a plain white shirt and held the dry pine needle Riley had given him as a keepsake. He looked down at the audience, then up at the screen behind him where footage of him atop the cliff played in reverent silence. Then he spoke. No acting, no memorized lines. Riley didn't just guide me across the bridge. She taught me how to face my fear, and Dad never gave up. A moment of silence filled the theater. Then applause rose steady and measured like the heartbeat after a long journey. Lucas looked down, hands clasped not from nerves, but because he knew that in that moment he had done more than make a film. He had returned a piece of childhood to his son, and given Riley something no one ever dared imagine, a voice in the ancient woods, loud enough to move a world once thought closed off. But can a single voice, however sincere, keep that forest forever green? Or will children like Finn be the ones to carry on the story, in their own way? Sometimes, we don't need to climb to the mountaintop to prove our strength. Simply having the courage to cross our own bridge, even if we tremble, even if we go slowly, is already a victory. The journey of Lucas, Finn, and Riley isn't just an adventure in the wild. It's a journey back to ourselves, to love, and to the belief that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to keep moving forward despite it. If you have ever endured a loss, ever felt yourself broken in life, then believe that, like that forest, you too can be reborn. Every crack lets in the light. Thank you for following the story to the end. If you see yourself somewhere in this journey, please leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, share the video with your loved ones in the US, and help us keep alive these healing stories. Because sometimes, a single story can change an entire soul.